years ago, there was once a great planet called Krypton. Its people were highly advanced in their knowledge and technology, but its people found themselves genetically bound to their world. So they stayed on Krypton, for leaving their world would mean certain death for the Kryptonians. They became a troubled society, a world where emotions were looked down upon, and all children were genetically engineered. Natural birth was considered barbaric. When one scientist, a man named Jor-El, who rejected his society's views on passion and love, discovered the inevitable destruction of Krypton was close at hand, he administered a serum to Kal-El to allow him and a few others, including a dog named Krypto, to be able to escape Krypton's destruction unscathed. The infant Kal-El traveled through space in a specially designed craft, which was actually an augmented Kryptonian birthing matrix that hadn't quite finished growing the baby. It also included the means to regrow at least some remnant of Kryptonian civilization in the form of the Fortress of Solitude. Kal-El was discovered by Jonathan and Martha Kent in the town of Smallville. In this small community, Kal-El grew up as Clark Kent, an idealistic boy who discovered and developed his powers thanks to Kryptonian physiology's unique interaction with the properties of Earth's yellow sun. He became the hero Superman at age 25 and worked to protect his Earth from many threats, including a man he knew from childhood named Lex Luthor, who would go on to become Superman's greatest enemy. As a young man and later throughout his life on this Earth, Clark would work as a superhero traveling to the 31st century to work with a team called the Legion of Superheroes. It was during his early period as Superman that he first learned of his legacy as one of the last surviving Kryptonians. Throughout all of this, Clark remained close to his adoptive parents, though his father would die well into his career as Superman. This version of Kal-El grew incredibly powerful over time and developed a strong network of allies and friends. His appearance marked a break in a long-standing taboo within modern society concerning superheroes, as this world hadn't seen any since the Justice Society in the 1950s. Thus, when Superman first appeared, others would follow, and with the greatest among them, Superman founded the Justice League. He developed a close friendship with this world's Batman and later Wonder Woman as well. Though they faced dozens of villains, both mystical and scientific in origin, including the likes of Brainiac, Parasite, and Darkseid, to name a few, they were victorious time and time again. Over the years, many clones of Superman were created as Lex Luthor and others took an interest in the formidable power of Kryptonian DNA. Some of these clones would end up becoming reliable friends and allies, while others proved to be dangerous enemies. During a battle with one of Superman's many villains, a powerful creature raised on Krypton named Doomsday managed to actually overwhelm Superman and kill the hero. Though several successors tried to take up his mantle following Kal-El's disappearance, Superman was revived thanks to Kryptonian battle armor stored within the Fortress of Solitude. It restored the hero, and for many years after this, he continued protecting his Earth as Superman at the side of countless others. At one point, Superman's powers began to fluctuate and change, transforming him into a being of pure energy for a time before he eventually returned to normal. While on another occasion, he had to contend with Lex Luthor being elected president. Superman was also a vital combatant against the Black Lanterns, but due to his previous death, was nearly possessed by them until being briefly made a White Lantern. Throughout all these events, trials, and tribulations, Superman was instrumental in averting crisis after crisis that affected not only this world, but at times all of reality. He was an important factor in recovering the lost Kryptonian city of Kandor, and eventually rebuilding this wayward city at the North Pole by the Fortress of Solitude. Calling this settlement New Krypton, for a time it looked as though the Kryptonian people had a real chance at a future. Eventually, conflict with the native humans forced them to move the city to a newly created planetoid on the other side of the sun, away from Earth. Yet hope remained for the future of these Kryptonian survivors. This version of Superman grew very close to a woman and a reporter named Lois Lane, who he met as Clark Kent while working as a reporter himself for the Daily Planet. He eventually revealed his secret identity to her as the two fell in love with one another. During this time they got married, however, Over time, something made a strange and still not fully understood attack on this Earth. Wanting to weaken the bond between the superheroes of this planet, this mysterious being rewrote this reality into one where its superheroes were far less experienced at protecting this planet. Superman and Lois managed to escape this change in reality during the Convergence event, where they were held in a bottled version of their world's Gotham City. Without his powers, Kal-El spent years in hiding with Lois, raising their new son, who they named John, while Superman patrolled Gotham as a powerless, masked vigilante. Ultimately, Superman escaped this bottled city and was recruited to stop the final Crisis of Infinite Earths from ever happening, an act which he and his fellow heroes were apparently successful in completing, before he and Lois found themselves on a new world, the rewritten Earth, with a new version of themselves living the lives they had once lived. For a time this worked fine, as the Kent family simply spent years in hiding, content to let the other Superman and Lois Lane live their lives while they would quietly raise their family in peace. After all, there was a perfectly good Superman already protecting this Earth. They weren't needed, and John could live as a happy, anonymous child. All that eventually changed years later, when the new Superman died, and Lois Lane of this new world disappeared. Following this, the Lex Luthor of this world was inspired to become Superman himself. While this version of Lex Luthor was apparently genuinely trying to redeem himself and be a better person, Kal-El, his opinion of this man informed by the years of bitter conflict he faced with his version of Lex Luthor, could not accept this, and brought himself back as Superman to confront Luthor himself. Though this proved to be a difficult thing for many of the people of this new world to accept, as well as for the Kent family, who viewed the heroes of this world as virtual strangers, Kal-El proved as capable a superhero as ever, as much a Superman as the original one of this world ever was, though now one with a strong focus on keeping his family safe. Not long after returning to this life, Superman discovered that the other Superman that died had actually survived in some form, and ultimately, he and this new Superman merged into one being, as did Lois Lane. In an instant, the lives and history of this Superman and Lois were rewritten to accommodate both timelines. The people whose lives were most closely tied to Clark and Lois's, including related superheroes and their co-workers at the Daily Planet, now remember Superman and Clark Kent as they are, a happily married man with a child, and a protector of this Earth. As far as all events involving Superman are concerned, he now exists across a merged timeline across two different worlds. This is the current version of Superman who protects Earth, and, it is believed, may be the only person who can truly save this world from whatever force altered the timeline in the first place. He is the most powerful being currently inhabiting Earth, and as such, whatever being that affected the timeline to begin with has taken a particular interest in Kal-El. For a time, this being had a certain influence over Jor-El, who was taken moments before Krypton's destruction and was used to carefully monitor and control this new Earth. Like Superman, this version of Jor-El was merged across the two timelines. Whatever being is involved in all these machinations, it is clear that this version of Superman is the central focus of this all-powerful enemy. His life and the people around him are clearly involved in whatever this being has planned. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my origins and bio for the New Earth Superman. So today, my little journey through the various origins and bios of the many characters over the years in the mainstream DC universe that have called themselves Superman, we have finally reached the current version of Superman as he exists in the comics. This one's a lot of fun, and it's interesting seeing how he's ever so subtly different from his predecessors, the Golden and Silver Age versions of Superman. New Earth Superman kind of exists in between these two, where Silver Age Superman is kind of one of the most powerful Superman to ever exist, and the original Superman is much weaker and a solid example of power creep. The New Earth Superman is an overall in-betweener, a really solid and powerful superhero, evocative of all the things that make Superman Superman, yet somewhat limited when compared to the Silver Age Superman that could move planets. Nevertheless, this is a fun character with perhaps the most depth to him yet. He has gone from a traditional superhero to one that had to deal with the troubled and more nuanced take of superheroes in the modern age and weathered it successfully, only to come out into the post-era of New 52 as a father and husband. And yes, it's also full of all the great comic booky stuff with deaths and rebirths and retcons, all the fun business that's associated with Superman as a whole in terms of a character. In terms of recommended reading, there's lots of great comics from before the New 52 era, some great stuff done in the early 2000s. Dan Durgens did a lot of good work with him in the 90s, or at least stuff that I'm looking back on affectionately now. But if I'm going to recommend anything, it might be Action Comics in the era of Rebirth, starting when they renumbered things back into the 900s range. That's when these comics really started to kick things into high gear, and I have a lot of affection for them. Beyond that, well, we'll see where things are going to go with newer Superman this month as Bendis begins writing this character, and I'm optimistic. And I've talked about how I feel of this new writer coming on to death at this point, so you can see some of my other Superman videos if you're curious about that opinion. Otherwise, let me know what you guys think of newer Superman in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.